Well, thank you very much, Tom. I appreciate you having me, and I appreciate all of you taking the time out to listen to my story, and also hopefully to learn some things of yourselves as well, going through the struggle of COVID. It's not just a mental a time that affects people with mental illness or people without mental illness. It's a time that affects the minds of everyone, the minds of the world, the global mind. And so I think the best way to start out is to tell you a little bit about myself, my background, and then go on from there with some of my observations of what it's been like overseas with it going on in Europe, and how that's affected my perceptions of myself with my illness when I was younger, and how it affects me now as I have gone through the recovery process over the course of the last 20 years. So I'll start off by reading an essay that I hope to have published when I return. Let's see here. Okay. 20 years ago, I was a healthy young adult about to graduate from a prestigious school in Boston, or so it seemed, but then something happened. A day after Ted Turner and Jane Fonda attended my graduation, where I never made it to the stage to accept my diploma, I woke up in a locked ward at a mental hospital. That's when I first realized our environments can change in an instant. This knowledge, actually an understanding, has helped me through the shifting environments of my life and is helping me weather these uncertain times during these uncertain times of a worldwide pandemic. Eventually, I wrote about the experiences of being a young adult with schizophrenia in a book titled Minority of Mind. And this is the title of the book, Minority of Mind. And I wrote this in 2012, after 2011, right after my last hospitalization, so right after a Minority of Mind, and this led to a speaking career, which I've traveled throughout the United States, Canada, and Europe to share my story and my perspective. Then everything changed again last year. I had a fire in my house. It happened on May 1st, the day before I was scheduled to travel to Illinois to speak to students about first break psychosis when I was a college student. I spent the night of the fire in a hotel on a barge ride away from our abandoned home on Deer Island, Canada's Bay of Fundy. I left for Boston the next day with the windows rolled down in my car, my clothes still smelling of smoke. After a couple of emotional moments with friends, I flew to Illinois in a state of disbelief. I realized on the plane that I had forgotten my outline for my 5-session, 2-day engagement. I was picked up at the airport, thankful to be where I was despite the disorientation. I met with students for a lunch question and answer, performed well despite moments of realizing sometimes while in conversation that I was in full-blown psychosis. Somehow, I was more resilient than I knew and stronger than I wanted to be. Later, I lived in an Airbnb while my house was decontaminated from toxic smoke and made habitable, and I felt like a stranger everywhere. The refuge from my house never ended in my mind. There seemed to be no summer. The trauma appeared to lock me in place, an uninhabitable region of my consciousness. I seemed to be losing touch with others. Upstairs felt like inside, and the downstairs like outside. I worked hard and prepared for October when we would leave for Greece, our departure due to visa restrictions living in Canada. After months of insomnia and hallucinations from lack of sleep, I got up from the no refuge of my bed and attempted to create the structure that had made me better before. I worked on a project called The Chef's Table, an initiative I founded 6 years ago that awards dining experiences to people with little money who would otherwise never be able to afford to dine in a restaurant alone or as a family. I started as a fluke years before, but it grew and grew, with restaurants in New England and New York contributing all kinds of meals in a variety of eating places. I continued working on The Chef's Table after touching down in Greece with amazing success. New restaurants joined our program, and many people who had dined had stories of gratitude to share. I felt like never before, as though I could bring what I do everywhere and succeed. I felt like the Midas with the golden touch. Then everything changed again. Insomnia returned, and with it an anxiety disorder. I had been tapering off with medicine for years and even stopped taking it. I had medicine with me just in case for this anxiety condition, but lost the medicine during my travel. I only had a half dozen pills, squirreled away in my luggage, and began cautiously rationing them. I had planned to be traveling in Europe until the spring, but by the winter, all my pills were gone. I told myself to stay as calm as possible. We were then in Ohrid in northern Macedonia, which was relaxing until the whole city shook from a 6.2 earthquake in Tirana, Albania, just over the border. We had planned on traveling to Tirana in less than a week, but our Airbnb host there texted us not to come. Dozens and dozens of buildings had collapsed. There were many dead and injured. We decided it was unsafe to be in the Western Baltics, where more small earthquakes were occurring. We left in 3 days, made it to the airport in Thessaloniki, Greece, where we took a plane to Cyprus, hoping there to have a warm, inexpensive place to spend the Christmas and New Year. In Cyprus, we traveled to Famagusta, a town in northern Cyprus, where it was much less expensive since we were traveling on a tight budget. Then suddenly it seemed like there'd be it suddenly seemed likely there'd be a war between the US and Iran. Already there had been airstrikes, and the airstrikes were happening around us. We realized we were less than 300 miles away from 3 world conflict zones: Syria, Iraq, and Turkey, dead center on the island of Cyprus. We were the only Americans in the area. My anxiety increased, but soon lessened as the most amazing time of meeting Muslims, and the first time in my heart with them, among them, yet all strangers there to help. I got rides offered to me and was able to travel outside the walled city. My mother had tea with Turkish women who maintained an Islamic cultural library. She found her assumption as a feminist in the Western world challenged and redefined her approach to Muslim women. A journalist for more than 25 years, she wrote about the experience. It was transformative for her as a woman. On February 1st, we flew back to Spain for the last leg of our journey that would take us back to Boston for a few weeks. Then the world changed. The unthinkable, a pandemic. Our 6 weeks in Spain have now been 6 months. As I had written this essay, it's now been about a year. Our original flight to Boston on March 23rd was canceled with only a day's notice. Subsequent flights we booked for May 4th, June 1st, and July 2nd were then canceled. Then we were told the original route we kept rebooking would be suspended until mid-September. October came, and our appeal to the Canadian government for special re-entry, where we were told we could only be made, which we were told only could be made at the border. We didn't want to risk being turned away there with pricey Airbnbs for an uncertain time. So we are here for the winter. Spain, like most of Europe, was in total lockdown from March until June. After the borders opened, tourism returned, and so did the spread of the virus here. COVID is in full rage again in many countries. It's hard to make sense of anything now, and as I write this, I struggle to orient myself to place and me as a physical person within it. We are living on top of a small mountain in an urbanization, usually frequented by many European tourists who have all gone home. We have not met any other Americans still here. Our financial resources have dwindled, patience and energy as well, but somehow my source of resilience remains intact. I have lived with uncertainty and survived. In fact, I now know we must all certainly embrace the impermanence of our lives. It is fear of uncertainty, or of facing an unpleasant certainty, that can destroy us more than anything. Yet we can see patterns now, after the spring and summer lockdown, as new restrictions are imposed. We learned after our consciousness was exposed to global pathways of air travel and lockdown in March, ways to create our own micro routines rather than looking out at the unfamiliar nature which had gripped the human mind. We are revising and rebuilding life. To live and not just imagine, to live and not just exist in fear of the unknown ahead, in a macro world of instability, with too little to plan in the immediate and too much to speculate ahead. Now we create weekly strategies for our own creative realities. See more of ways that this can be done, and the essay goes on, we talk about we go on to talk about how you can I had started a Minority of Mind project. So that essay continues, and I go on to mention about my Zoom presentations, but I want to leave off there. So what happened? So we ended up having to redefine our reality. We had to redefine revise and rebuild our realities, because there really this turned to, it was almost as though a huge storm had passed and leveled everything down. In some ways, it was like being outside and on top of a mountain and without cover. It was that there's almost like there was no cover, and there was nothing. And we had there were sirens in the streets. The Spain was some of the toughest, had some of the toughest lockdown initially in Europe. And the police would cruise the streets with loudspeakers saying, "Stay inside, stay inside, stay inside." We weren't allowed to leave the house at all initially, only to go from the pharmacy to the supermarket and back home. So it was surreal. It was a surreal time. Reality as I had known it, I completely changed. My concept of what was my thinking day to day was, the chef's table, which is a social initiative I had mentioned I had started. I was spending hours a day doing that, and I had other initiatives, other things I was doing. My career, my speaking career, I was thinking about all the time too. So all the thoughts that I had on my mind had disappeared, but strangely though, in the loss of those thoughts became an awareness of a larger thought, which was suddenly a new connection, a connection to the loss of the world itself as well, and going outside of myself. It's almost as though a little bit of a narcissism or self-obsession disappeared and was replaced by the realization that I wasn't just a person suffering, or it wasn't just my life that had been disrupted, but my entire mind's life, our entire mind's life, the world's entire mind's life had been disrupted. I started to see that my illness, my problems, what I had been called mentally ill, and what I had been diagnosed with, the schizophrenia, it wasn't just suddenly my irregular, unusual mind. It was also the mind of the healthy mind. The healthy mind also is in jeopardy. The healthy mind of people, the most functional, the most highly functioning people, were having difficulty struggling with the day-to-day as well. And so I stood back and I thought about that in my room and said to myself, what can I do? What can I do about this? Because I'm supposed to be an unhealthy person. I'm supposed to have an unhealthy mind, and I'm seeing that that the healthy mind is in jeopardy. Well, that's pretty scary. So should I just let this, should I just let the madness continues, and what am I supposed to do? I said, well, what could I do about that? How could I perhaps help the healthy part of the mind, and how can the community help the healthy part of the mind? So I found parts of my mind that were healthy, and said to myself, well, what's going wrong with these parts, and what's wrong with the parts that aren't healthy as well? And I started to notice a pattern. I noticed a pattern that in my contacting my friends and talking to them at home, that there was this bizarre idea that the mentally ill people couldn't contribute, that they wouldn't be able to actually help people with their own stories of the suffering that they share day to day and all of their losses, and how that could help someone who has a healthy mind realize that some of the losses that the healthy mind, or people with healthy minds, are suffering are also losses that parallel losses of having mental illness all the time. And that's when I started to notice as well that that I could be of help, and that my friends could be of help too. So what we did about it was I got together with some friends, and we started something called the Minority of Mind Project, which is an initiative started to in order to create Zoom meetings like this, where we can communicate with people that are having difficulty psychologically, and from any place, from various places, and we have the ability to chat by different forms of social media, and we talk about what we're going through day to day, the problems that we're encountering with COVID day to day, the good things that are happening, the bad things, and also talking about how that relates to us in a global level, in a level of connection of mind to everyone else, and how this is a time that we can actually help as a community, not just psychiatrists and doctors and frontline workers, but also people who've already going through mental health difficulties, because we realize isolation, and with isolation, there are many forms of it. So there's the lonely alone, that we all know, the lonely alone where we feel as though we're categorized, we're stigmatized. That I have felt in my past that that I wasn't a person, but and I wasn't even an illness or a person. I was instead just a diagnosis, and that's dehumanizing, as you can imagine. And by that dehumanizing method of just being a diagnosis and not even a person or an illness, not even having illness or that, you can imagine the non-existence that would create. You can imagine that how alone that would be, how you'd feel like you would want to reach out from yourself to just to tell someone something's wrong, to try to speak out and to say and to try to explain, say just to help, ask for help, and not just ask for help, but also it's beyond just help. There's a word help, but also expressing yourself, how to articulate exactly the feelings that are going through the mind, the feelings that are going through the body, the feelings that are going through the soul, and the senses. And that's something that is a huge loss in COVID, is that all of those things for us are affected on all levels, not just people with mental health difficulties, but also those with the healthiest minds. It's a reaching out, and in that alone struggle that many people know of now as social distancing, something that people with mental illness live with day to day, and that lonely alone, it can be some of the worst. The feeling of just wanting a hug, just wanting a hug would be enough. It would just be enough to hold on to someone and just have a hug is something that would be anything's better than being the lonely alone, as a diagnosis or as a dehumanizing method of psychiatry at sometimes. So what we've told people about that is that friends, and what we've told as the Minority Mind Project together, we've talked about how with our peers about how we're pinpoints, that the diagnoses are pinpoints on maps, and that the world is like the mind, and that we have a global mind, and that we're just in different points on that global mind, and that it's that a diagnosis is a point on a map, like the mind. And so I might be over here right now in Spain, with my mind and the problems that I have with my diagnosis, but there's a global mind, and so there's a points, but we can walk just as you walk across the room to another point, and you're in a different state suddenly altogether. And so you see that you travel, and that diagnoses aren't just a person. So that lonely alone was something very difficult to deal with, to struggle with day to day. And I emerged from it through realizing that I could reach out, and that we could as a community with my friends reach out and do something to help people, with people with healthy minds. And how we did that was looking at ways that what are the similarities between mental health, the healthy part of the mind, and the unhealthy part of the mind. And what we saw when we were talking about it was that the healthy part of the mind is very similar to the unhealthy part of the mind during this time, because it is a strange time. In mental health, sometimes we have so much in mental health and in mental illness right now. There is so much ahead in the future that can't be planned for, and there might be so little in the moment that can be done, that can be predicted. So it's a wall of time. I've noticed that when I was 23 and very ill, that I would wake up in the morning and there'd just be this wall of time ahead of me, and I could hardly function in the immediate moment. I'd get out of bed and I'd say, well, I can hardly, it's difficult for me to get out of bed in the morning, much less, the whole expanse ahead. And so there was a problem with both the expanse of time and also the immediate moment of the time. And that was the connection that we realized between the healthy mind and the unhealthy mind during COVID, and how someone with mental health difficulties could help create insight into that, to see how that can have a negative effect on the ability to function, how that has a negative ability for the mind to function when you can't plan, and when you can't plan the immediate or what's foreseeable. It creates fear, and it creates a panic, and anxiety states. You feel as though your life's in danger. And that's very, very similar to mental health difficulties, is that when you can't foresee what's going to happen in the future, and you don't know what you can do in the immediate moment, well, then, panic sets in. You feel as though, what now? What's going to happen? And in that fear, that fight or flight response, you want to call it, anything you'd like, in that moment, so many things rush to mind, and it can create a different reality in that fear. So, so this different reality that's been created now is one that also comes from other aspects of life as well. Of course, political aspects, but as we all know, and so we've not only been subjected to nature, but the nature of the world as it is as a virus, as a pandemic, but also a political nature. And so we've experienced another kind of alone that way as well. We've experienced another alone in that, realizing that there's a certain kind of retreat. There can be a certain kind of retreat or a certain kind of aggression, a fight or flight response. Once again, you are sensed with something so dramatically different in front of us, a wall of time, ahead of time that is predicted, and also in the immediate moment, the inability to do anything about that. And so in that alone, there's a flight or flight response, and nature kicks in. Another nature kicks in as well, and so that's another thing that's been a plague is just the nature of society in its current time. Man versus man, man versus institution, woman versus institution, woman versus man. It's something that both. These are climates. You have to understand. There's the nature of the world, which is an environment, but there's also a nature. There's also a climate of. That's why they call it a political climate, and it's an environment as well. And the environments play off of each other. They affect our bodies. Our bodies are affected. Our minds are affected, and so this condemned alone, I call it. Whether you're whatever party you're a part of, whether you're whatever party, everyone is in the middle of it. Everyone is in the middle of it, and you realize that that condemned alone, the fighting and the flighting, the fighting and the frighting, that condemned alone is also one that we live, and that's an environment. That's a climate too. That's an alone. It's an alone that everyone has shared in the past years during the political struggles in the United States. There's been an alone there, a huge alone there, and it's been a condemned alone on all fronts, condemning or condemned, fighting or flighting, very similar to the lonely alone, and having so much ahead and so little and so little in the immediate to plan for. So these alones and these environments play off of each other, and we find ourselves sometimes sitting and reeling, saying to ourselves, "God, where's my mind? What has happened? What has happened to reality? What has happened to my ideas of a future, of my future, of what are my aspirations in life? What do I want to do? What do I find important? What do I find interesting? How do I survive?" People are asking themselves now, how do we survive? How do we, how do you eat? The food shortages. How do we work? Work shortages, all these things. And so it becomes something that we become part of nature. Again, we become part of a nature of a need to survive and a will to survive. And we become something that is much more of the earth. And we become part of the changing environment. And that changing environment is something that that we have to live through, and that we'll continue to live through. COVID isn't just a passing illness; it's also one that has altered the it's altered the landscape of the mind as we know it. Already, we're hearing about medical doctors are talking about that, how that's possible. That could have altered our mental landscape from here on out. But suffice to say, so through that altered landscape, we realized as a community that we have to be very much more self-sufficient in ways that are very difficult to be able to. I remember when I was 23 and first diagnosed, I could hardly, I could not get out of bed in the morning. It was difficult to even take showers. It was difficult to do any of these things. And meanwhile, all these things, on the top of that, you have to deal with that there might not be any services available to you, that there might not be services that are available to help during that time. And that's why we talk about self-aid or self-care. I think it's called self-care. I call it to myself self-aid. While I've been in Spain, I've had to rely upon some things of myself because certain essentials just haven't been available. My medicine ran out. I no longer had medicine, and so I had to and I had to go back on it. And I hadn't needed medicine for a long period of time. I needed anxiety medicine. So I went back. I eventually. And also at the time, my mother had a medical problem with her eye, one that almost left her without sight years before. So while she was having difficulty with her eye, threatening to have her sight lost, I was also beginning to have psychological difficulties again, ones that paralleled the experiences that I had when I was 23 years old. I was waking with waking nightmares, terrible nightmares, images in my mind of nightmares from childhood, even way back from when I was 8 years old, night terrors, not being able to sleep, sleeping so little that hallucinations began, seeing colors, seeing hues, things that aren't there, and then the environment changed again. We were in Spain this summer, and it was one of the hottest summers in Spain that in recent history. And in Spain, that's saying a lot, as you can imagine, for a summer. It's about 40 degrees here, and 40 degrees centigrade is about at one particular day. It was about 40 something degrees centigrade, which is equivalent to like 114. Of course, you in Arizona probably don't think that's a big deal, but me from Massachusetts, where an 80-degree day in the summer is sweltering. It was a huge deal. And so, but here it was that way every day. Every day was really, really hot and brutal hot sun. And I don't think in Arizona many people are going to sympathize with this, but I have to say that there was one point, however, where every 20 minutes someone was going to the hospital in Spain because of heat exhaustion. That's how bad it was on one particular day. So even for this climate, it was brutal, and this lasted for 5 months. And we had a mega drought here. It's called a mega drought, and the mega drought occurred just as COVID it started around March, right around when COVID came, and it didn't rain at all. It didn't rain for 5 months with 100-degree temperatures, and so after 5 months with 100-degree temperatures, no clouds, no rain, it became a surreal environment. Things became, time itself seemed for me distorted. My mother as well, here is someone who's a professional journalist of 27 years, the sharpest mind, able to recall facts from long ago, able to navigate her way through the most needed detail in a news story, was having difficulty with her mind. Was having difficulty with her mind functioning in the environment that we were in the mega drought, in the COVID. Our minds had been opened up to now a global mind of confusion. Days would drift. Days would turn into almost like we would wake up in the morning and it seemed like the day was over much faster than we thought it would be. Hours seemed to go on for an hour would seem to go for 4 hours. The time was distorted. We we were sitting on top of the where we had moments where we just didn't we became disjointed, disattached from what we knew it to be as a day. Um, Days would pass, and it would be very confusing and very hard to keep track of exactly when the last day was. That was that particular day. What I ate last night for dinner became difficult to remember. Things that normally would be easy to remember became difficult to remember. It was a forgetfulness. It was a distortion. And my mother, of 27 years, journalist who had the strongest mind, realized this too. She said, this is something that, and we both struggled with it immensely. And also, she had an eye injury as well. And so I looked to her, and I looked to her at that time because I was scared, because I hadn't been experiencing many symptoms of mental health difficulties for years. I had been speaking nationally at NAMI affiliates throughout the United States. I've also spoken in Canada and Europe on topics of mental health, quality of care, family dynamics, speaking to audiences about my experiences in the mental health system as a young adult, and how that affected me in the concept of identity, of personhood, and of concept of independence, and of independence. And so at that point, we realized that something else had to be done, because what we were doing wasn't working. I needed to get anti-anxiety medicine. I had run out of it in Turkey, and I didn't have any. And so I would wake up, and I was under the sleep, and I would get up, but I knew that I had to take care of my mother too, because her eye was in jeopardy. And so it was a place that I hadn't been at in a long time. But I suddenly started to realize what my mother was going through while I was 23. I realized that, oh God, well, she had to take care of me during these times when I was well. And so I said to myself, well, now, God, now she has this eye problem that's very threatening, and I have to take care of her. And so I became very panicked, and very much like, oh, I have to get out of the bed in the morning. I have to perform. I feel like I want to stay in bed, or I haven't slept in 2 days. And zero sleep in 2 days, and I want to just lie in bed and just and just succumb to the anxiety, or just let myself just rest there. But I couldn't do it, because I knew that my mother was having difficulty as well, and that her eye was in jeopardy, and that our lives were in a different place, where we were physically in a way that I talked about earlier as a fight or flight response. We were part of a different environment suddenly. Our houses, it was almost like our mental house, or our mental structures that we had known as reality. Our sense of time, too much ahead of you, our sense of place, the present moment, doing what we do in the present moment. The sense of place and time suddenly was altered. Our mental home, our mental home was changed. And so that fight or flight response was also a change of climate, a change of environment. And so that change of environment became something that we had to live with in many ways. We had to get food, and we couldn't get down. We were on a mountaintop, so the way we got food was the way we would go down the mountain. We would have to walk, and so I'd walk 2.5 miles down the mountain to get food, and bring it back up in my backpack and carry water. Luckily, we had a store that wasn't that far down, about a mile down, for water. So I would go down and get these big things of water and bring them up the hill, and meanwhile, I'm in a state of, it's depressed. I was depressed. Honestly, I was really depressed, and I was anxiety ridden, and to a point where it's you realize that things can come out of you and loss that you weren't aware that could. And that's what the message I wanted to bring to a lot of people who have mental health that are mentally have mental health difficulties, is realizing that we're much stronger. Not people sometimes say you're stronger than you're stronger than you are, or such a thing. But really, the saying should be you're stronger than you want to be. And it's a big difference, distinction to be made. Is that stronger than you want to be is very different, because you want to be strong. Everyone wants to be a strong person, but when you're stronger than you want to be, it means that you really hurt so much that 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 you really want to let go. You want to just be able to be honest. You want to be honest and just let go, but you can't be, and you have to keep persevering. And that's what's hard, is that none of us can let go, really, ultimately. And that how do we get through that? And when none of us can let go, or not, when none of us can not continue on, where do we go from there? And so how do we emerge from those alones? How do we emerge from the lonely alone, where we continue on, the condemned alone, the changing environments? How do we continue on from that? Because we have to, and because we're stronger than we want to be in some ways. So we continue on, and the way that I've done that is by reaching out to NAMI communities like you, like to NAMI Arizona, and to other affiliates, NAMI affiliates. By my mother is also we both sought help by starting Creative Solutions, and this is where we decided to go outside of the overburdened system. I said to myself, my doctor can't talk to me now, or now my therapist can't talk to me because there's enough time, or my doctor, there are too many appointments, or COVID has created this inability to there's too many people in the waiting areas, or there are no beds available. So what do? My mother and myself as well, we are thinking the same thing as many people who have mental health that are in an overburdened system. What do we do now? We asked. We said we have to find creative solutions. That's all that can be done. That's all we could do. And so the creative solutions that we found had to be through an alternative method of awareness, of reality. We had to imagine. We had to create a different reality. We had to create life where we were living in. And that's the ticket. That's a key to everything in life, is that no matter how miserable life is, that we have to make something of where we are in it in that moment. And everyone, but the brilliant thing about that is that a lot of people who have wonderful lives have to do that as well and have had to learn that lesson. Like people who have mental health issues have had to learn that lesson. People who have mental health issues have had to many times escape into their minds and think, oh, well, and create other realities that are more pleasant. Well, people with mental health, the healthiest minds, have had to create their own realities as well now. We've had to wake up in the morning and put on our shirt, our shirt to go to work when there's no office there. We've had to I've had to get up and go to the computer, and you create a reality where you are, and that's healthy. And suddenly you realize that maybe imagination, and a little bit of imagination in reality isn't that unhealthy at all. Maybe looking at things and saying to yourself, well, why isn't it healthy to create a work at home? As many people have had to now work at home. Well, why isn't it healthy to adopt the same behavior that one person might have had at the office at home? It's so strange, to dress up, to put your work shirt on, and to do your daily day like you're going to work, but your work is only in the other room. So you're going to your work, going to the office in the other room, but you're just not driving all the way there. So the point is that people with the healthiest minds have had to create their own realities as well. And that we've had to, and that people with mental health difficulties have also had to especially during COVID, as it is now, how we all have to create creative realities, and with what we have for our abilities in the moment. So what my mother and I have been doing, we're still stranded here after 5 flights have been canceled since March. Our flight path can't go through the airport that's closest to us. We have some problems with the ability to leave from a particular flight path that leads us to Boston correctly. We can't get into Canada because the borders are closed to Canada, to the world. Canada won't let anyone into Canada where we have a house, and so we're unable to get back to a place where we would consider to be a safe place, and that's what's kind of scary. And so, what do you do? So you have to create your own safe place base, as I've heard. We've been listening both my mother and myself have been listening to we listen to some self-healing meditative tapes. We meditate every day. We have a routine. We create a routine, and routine is the most important thing ever. For us, it's the most important thing. In the morning, we make breakfast, and I go about my daily day. I have a routine to go about and have. We have oatmeal in the morning, some oatmeal or some particular same food, or routine is the most important thing, because it creates. The first thing you have to do once something has been leveled around you, or your mind has been strewn away, is create a foundation. And so, how do you create a foundation? So, what my mother and I have done is create a foundation by creating a positive environment and positive people, and trying to create positive experiences. Those 3 things: positive environment, positive people, positive experiences. And if you don't have those, you can still have your own safe place space. You can still have your own little altar, your own little space you create, even if it's a corner of a room, to create, to put a chair into, and to put just some of your favorite objects onto. To have a table with a chair in front of a table with your favorite objects, and to create your own and create your own space. Creating a sense of space is what's really important. Having your own area that you can call your own sphere, your own space. My mother and I have also done some work with relaxation meditation. Very important to have a environment of mind that can be somewhat calm in the midst of extreme, that fight or flight response, the uncertainty. So we listen to meditation. We do meditation daily, and mindfulness, definitely mindfulness. We also have other methods of helping ourselves, and that's routine, like little traditions. We create little traditions week to week. So we have on a particular day, we might have a particular food. So you want to mark the time, because time is what's so difficult in many ways with the mind. Time and sense of place are very difficult with COVID and with the psyche in general. You realize that time slips away, or that you lose track of time. That a week can go by and you think that you don't remember what was done. You might not remember what was yesterday, what was tomorrow, or what was the day before. So to keep a chronology of events is very important. Journaling, it helps a lot. Journaling is everything to me. That's how I wrote this book. That's how I wrote Minority of Mind. This was a journaling. I did this day to day. Every entry is a date. Journaling, so that I could have a sense of history, so that I could have a sense of time passing, and by getting a sense of time passing, you can start to see patterns of thinking. You can start to see things you're thinking of over and over again, or patterns of things you're thinking that can create ways you can anchors within those patterns of that chronology of thinking to get better from. And so that's what we do, is we create chronologies of our minds, and also chronologies of times that we share together. So Friday night, we have pizza. And now that some of the restrictions of COVID are over, we have a couple of restaurants around the area on top of the mountain that do open. Very limited hours, but on Friday there's the ability to get pizza. So we do that every Friday. We have a routine and we have a tradition. So that's one method. So we're talking about foundations of getting better, foundations of recovery, and how a huge part of a foundation is to have a sense of place and a sense of immediacy, an immediate place to be. And if you have that, then you have a foundation for recovery. That's one foundation. Sometimes there aren't positive people in our lives. Sometimes there are positive people in our lives. And if there are, there aren't. That's something that definitely is a contributing factor to getting better. If there aren't, there are also those things that can create a positiveness to them as a presence. We have our pets. Our pets are wonderful companions that create a positive environment. And so if you have a routine and you have a loving companion, another life with you, you can start to see that a foundation in life starts to create around you, and that you're not alone, that you have a place, and there's life there, and a place, and more life there, and more place, more life there, and you get better and better and better as you realize what really is around you, and how you can suddenly orient yourself in your mind to where you are, to seeing that life exists right in front of you, and that where you are, there's life, and that you're a part of life, and that you take care of life. And that's an amazing moment. You should realize that.
Ben, could you go ahead and wrap up
sure.
So we can take questions?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. I wasn't aware that so much time had passed. So foundation of positive people, positive environment, and positive experiences when you can have them, and when you can't, to create a reality where you are and where you're living at any moment, and that's something that's a creative approach to life. So
do you want to go ahead and show some of the pictures that you brought?
Yeah, so I'll show you. I wasn't aware that actually, honestly, Tom, I thought we had 2 hours. I didn't think we just had an hour. I'm so sorry. But I have the PowerPoint presentation I actually covered throughout what I was talking about. But while as far as we have, I'll show you some pictures of where we are right now. Okay, so this is where, let's see here. Okay. Well, right here, I'll just end with this. As far as creating reality, the use of AI, cloud therapy, going outside and looking at the clouds. For a moment, you can realize that if you could look up at the sky and see clouds and ask yourself questions of those clouds, and those shapes that you see in the clouds when you go outside are shapes that no one else in the world sees. Only your eyes see them, and only you see the images in those clouds. And so if you can ask yourself the images that you see in those clouds, you can ask your mind anything. You suddenly have a place of your own mind. You have your own mind. You're alone with your mind, but are you? Because you suddenly realize that by seeing those images in the clouds, that your mind is as big as the sky. Your mind is huge. You have an imagination in your mind, and that it's as large as you can imagine the shape of a cloud to be. A cloud that only a shape that you can imagine to be. So you realize how large your mind is. So that was one of the methods of mental awareness I wanted to create, was cloud therapy. The realization that you can go outside on a cloudy day. My friends do this with me. I do this. We do this all the time. You take a piece of paper and a pen. We go outside and look at the sky and write down what we see as in pictures, and ask ourselves where we've seen these images before and how they can help us. Also, the use of there's something called free sky view. I showed the last few minutes. Very important. If you can look up artificial intelligence, the use of AI, very crucial. It's called Free Sky View. It's an app, download app, Free Sky View. And if you're stuck inside, if someone's stuck inside and you can't leave, and you're in those four walls, well, it's really cool to be able to use your phone or whatever and look and see that through that wall, straight in front of you, all the way, can be a star right in front of you, all the way, maybe or a planet or something like that. And you can see that in Free Sky View. You can filter all around the room and see that you're not really in a square room. You're actually in a spherical reality, because you pointed at the ground. It'll show you what star or what planet is right at your feet, all the way there. And it's totally 100% true. It's not imaginary. It's mathematics. And so it's all pinpointed down to a science. So you really, where your eyes are looking at that moment with the AI is where it is. So if you're looking down straight down the ground, and that's where the moon is. That's where the moon really is. You know, if you were in a sphere, in a large sphere. It's the use of AI, so you can suddenly tell where you are at any moment and get your own sense of direction in your living room. So these are different creative solutions to living life when you feel you're confined in confinement with walls and space. So what we're trying to do is bring a new orientation to our minds, a new awareness when we're stuck inside. And the way to do that is by, even if you can just look outside, look at the clouds, ask yourself some questions about those clouds, and you can suddenly ask yourself about your whole life. Your whole life is suddenly revealed in your mind, and it's as big as the sky. So it's a great orientation. Yes. So that's my presentation. I really appreciate you having me a lot, and thank you, Tom, as well, for having me. And I wish you all much luck and much success. And I hope to be back in the United States very soon.
Wonderful, Ben. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, well, I don't see any hands up or any other indicators. So what I'm going to do is thank our speaker, Ben, very much. We very much appreciate your time hearing about your
thanks a lot.
Your experience.
Yes, thanks a lot. Yes, and good luck to you all. Good luck to you all in your pursuits of realizing that we are part of a changing environment, and that we're in this together. And it's not an alone struggle at all. That the healthiest minds are trying to navigate their way through it. Everyone is going through it, and we're in this together.
Thank you very much. And before we close, I wanted to remind everybody, next month's talk is our very own Craig O'Hare, who we're grateful to have as one of the directors of NAMI Santa Fe. And his talk is going to be Boost Your Mental Health Immune System. And that'll be on Tuesday, February 9th. So we're looking forward to hearing from Craig and having another great session. So thank you all very much. And let's see. Daniel, thank you very much for posting that information about Ben's book. If you haven't looked on the chat, you can find info about where to get Ben's book, Minority of Mind. And
you can also go to minorityofmind.com. It's a website that we have up. And please feel free to contact us. We have a bunch of peers that are part of a project to help. And we're welcome to any emails you might send. We can set up a phone chat or internet chat, texting. We can communicate at any time. So look at minorityofmind.com, and you will find a website where you can learn more information about what we do as a community to help each other out.
Fantastic. Ben, thank you very much. Yes.
Seems like there's a question on the chat from Robin.
I didn't understand. Robin,
sorry. Can you hear me? I wanted to know, when he talked about creative solutions that you and your mom worked on, do you have any kind of booklet or something online about that?
Yeah, actually I do. I have a book I wrote called Experiments in Imagination, about those creative solutions that I was talking about.
Say the name again. Experiments
in Imagination.
In imagination.
In imagination. But I think the biggest part that would have helped right now to everyone is cloud therapy. The concept of cloud therapy. Because there's no price to that. It doesn't cost anything. Look at clouds, and it's your own therapy. Because what we do is we it all takes a piece of a pen and a piece of paper, and you can go find your mind. That's very, very large.
So do you go out with the pad and paper and look at the clouds and draw it, or just write down what
you know, kids, you say, oh, I see a duck in the cloud. I see a duck in the cloud, and then you see yourself in your mind. So then you ask yourself in your mind, where in my life have I seen a duck before in my mind? And suddenly a memory might come back to you of a duck, time you've seen a duck in your life. And what were you feeling when you saw that duck in your life? Or what was going on in your mind when you saw that duck? And not only that, but then you see that I saw a duck in the clouds and no one else could have seen that, just me. So you suddenly see how alone you are, but are you really? And so suddenly it gives you a perspective of what alone really is. If you can just look at it that way, just for a few seconds, you can see that notion.
That's very interesting.
That notion, yeah. You'll suddenly see that, yeah. Okay. That's a note I'd like to leave you on, is that orientation right there.
All right.
Excellent. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ben.
Yeah,
Thank
bye.
you very much.
Thank
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you, Ben. Good night, everybody.
Thank you, Ben.
Bye. Yep.